So guys, as you can tell by the post earlier and thumbnail, we're going into what K9 can truly do. Now, this is going to be interesting because pure K9, like I said, is the focus of these videos that I'm doing on Justice Hunters, because yes, there are the splashable versions which have higher ceilings, but I do believe that if you are trying to enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh at the moment, and also if you're a beginner or trying to actually get someone into the game, this is actually a very good set to utilize because the decks actually are very decent competitively, and pure, actually, they can be run with other engines later on. But with pure, this is the point of the strategy in K9, because what this thing can really do, what is its true strength, we are about to showcase it, because there is a lot here that I do think when it comes down to the nitty gritty of the archetype, a lot of people probably just use the bare minimum of it. But if you wanted to play pure, and I'm telling you, this could be a sleeper for a lot of the actual decks in Justice Hunters, this is the way to go. So, talking about it, we actually have 3 cards that I'm going to be focusing on for the most of the video, because these are the 3 that I believe are the cards that are probably considered the least powerful at the moment and are probably the most underutilized of the archetype, but they actually are sneakingly powerful, as when you start to realize what the archetype is trying to do, you will be surprised that these cards are actually very useful and powerful as well. So the point of this starting off is going to be with the one that I personally, and I did say this actually in my video, I thought was the worst. That being the K9EW Special Release Experiment. This is the Trap. Now, I will read this card just for the sake of understanding, because I think a lot of people actually have passed up this card and have never bothered reading it, because I don't even see... I even tried to look for pure deck lists. I don't even see people trying to run this exactly. They may talk about it, but they don't really run it. But the reason why is this. This card allows you to special summon 1 K9 monster from your hand or graveyard. Then you can special summon 1 K9 Xyz monster from your extra deck by using that monster as material. This is treated as an Xyz summon, but destroy the monster special summoned from the extra deck during the end phase of the next turn. During the end phase, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 1 K9 quick play spell in your graveyard. You get to set it. You can only use each effect of K9EW Special Release Experiment once per turn. So if you're wondering, why do I want to focus on this card at all? Well, one of the bigger reasons that this card needs to be focused on in the pure version is that there are times where you may actually brick. Now, the main way to not try to brick is to try to max out on everything, but in reality, we're not trying to do that. The main reason you don't want to max out on everything is that the spells by themselves are good, but they're not great outside of case of K9. And for the Trap, you would never want to max out on this thing, because it only works if a monster is in your hand or if a K9 monster is already in rotation in the graveyard. So this means that this card would brick you if you don't have access to that. But in order to boost the consistency of K9, you're usually running maxed out, if you're playing pure, everything except for Lupus out 3. Now, this is just designed because the more you have the others in rotation, the much easier time you will have being able to get everything onto the field. This is just because, by simple math, the more times you see Izuna, the more times you see Lantern, the more times you see Joe, the more times you see stuff like your case of K9 to get access to the main starters of the deck. The extender forms of the other K9 monsters do really good. And then this specific card fills in a gap that the archetype doesn't have. Now, the reason that EW actually fills a gap is that there are times where you do have that one K9 monster. It's just by, unfortunately, the situation of the release of this archetype right now, because it just was released with its first wave of support, so that means more monsters can come down the line, and we know there will be. But EW fits this specific niche where, at least if you have this and another monster either in your hand or in grave already, this can allow you to get back into the game by allowing you to special summon that K9 monster out to the field and then immediately turning it into a 1-card Xyz summon. This is also to go in conjunction with the Liberation spells, allowing you to then tag that specific monster into any of the other forms to avoid that destruction effect of EW, but also continuously get your kind of like your loop going. If you understand how pure functions, this is more so you're kind of keep your Xyz climbing, but also allow you to come back and play with just one simple card. Additionally, its effect in the end phase is good, because if you are running pure, you will be running a slightly higher count of the Liberation spells, being the Force Release and your LC Liberation, which we'll talk about in a second. But both of those cards are going to be able to be reset if they're already engraved. So this card actually has a built-in kind of like comeback mechanic that allows you to, if you don't actually get the chance to go to the battle phase, you can put the Liberation spells back onto the field with its own effect. The reason I wanted to bring this up is that in pure, this is actually what I'm debating as a one of. Now, the reason why I'm debating is that although I like this card in terms of its practicality, the reason we don't always want to run it is that in theory, this isn't that good if you draw it like going second, and then it's not that good if you were to see it going first unless you have the right setup. But the reason I did want to focus here is that what you're truly able to do with this card is decide whether you want to go first or second with this card, because you can get this off a lantern, and I do think that this card is actually very powerful. This knowledge here is important because what you're really trying to do with this one is at bare minimum, this allows you to go into a 1 card X werewolf, so you will have a disruption against your opponent on their turn, and I do think that's something to kind of bring up if you're trying to figure out if you want to run this card. It allows you to get into the 1 card versions of the Xyz monsters just so that you can have a platform to start with the other quick plays, or vice versa. If you have no choice and you're forced to do this, you can put up the X werewolf against your opponent. Remember, this has no restriction as well, so since it's a trap, you can use this during the battle phase to kind of catch your opponent off guard if you want to do that. So there is that kind of potential there. So it is up to you, but we'll move on to the next one, as we'll talk about one of my favorites, that being K9 LC, well, Release Restraint, but I'm still calling it LC Liberation. This card is really good, and I'll talk about why you probably don't see it in your engine versions, but you see this a lot in pure. Now, LC Liberation specifically allows you to target a K9 Xyz monster or a rank 5 Xyz monster you control, and then you special summon from your extra deck 1 K9 Xyz monster with a different name by using that monster you control. This is treated as an Xyz summon. You transfer its materials to the summon monster. At the end of the battle phase, if your K9 monster battled this turn, you can set this card from your graveyard, and then you can only use each of the effects of K9, blah, blah, blah. You get the point there. Reason we're talking about LC Liberation, and the reason why it's so important for what pure K9 can actually do, is that this is your bridging card. Now, what I mean by bridging card is that a lot of times people say a bridge is usually the card that allows you to access another part of your deck. However, in K9, what this actually allows you to do is bridge your rank 5 monsters that are not K9 monsters in the extra deck into the K9 monsters. Now, there's a few options. Now, the best one I personally like to do for the actual release of this one is actually going to River Stormer, because when you make River Stormer, which is the infinite track monster, this one's seen a lot of play in like Crystron K9, but also K9 in general. This one allows you to, if you destroy a monster by battle, it will then attach the monster it destroyed in battle as a material. This is big because what you're really trying to do here is get a massively big X werewolf. And the reason this is important is that if you get access to 2 of the level 5s to get into River Stormer, and River Stormer destroys a monster, and then you have LC in hand, you should be able to OTK your opponent by simply going LC in the battle phase, which is the other important factor of this card, and immediately turn that rank 5 River Stormer into your X werewolf. And if you do the math, a 3 material or an Xyz monster that had 2 materials that would gain a 3rd one, if it was to rank up effectively into another monster, that monster would then have, you guessed it, 4 materials. So that X werewolf would have 4 materials. At 3,300, it can attack up to 4 times. Do the math, your opponent is super dead. And that's kind of the point of LC Liberation, being able to turn your monsters that usually would be kind of cooked, to be honest, because they have nothing left to do on the field, into your boss monster. They can also turn into Hound, which can be very powerful because Hound has a very powerful standby phase effect we'll talk about in a second. But the point is, LC Liberation is a card that in pure actually surpasses its limits, because in the engine decks you can run this, but I do think that because your rank 5 engine isn't as big in terms of the amount of K9 monsters you're running, this feels less important because you aren't able to go into as many of the K9 Xyz monsters as you would like to, because you're probably running less in the engine decks. But if you're playing pure, you're running double copies to triple copies of some of your monsters, just so you can increase the count of the monsters you go into. And then this is exactly why Release Restraint, or specifically LC Liberation, is so good. This allows you to kind of push your opponent into that position where Werewolf can clear games quicker, but this also allows you to turn like your Valons that have maybe a Lupus underneath still into like an untargetable Ripper with an extra material, or a Wolf with an extra material, or vice versa. You start to get the combination here. This is just so that you have the ability to make really big Xyz monsters with extra materials and push your opponent. This also can allow you to kind of make an extra like big Zeus after you attack during the battle phase. So that is an option too. But we will proceed to the last card, and this is actually one of my favorite ones. This is being K900 Hound. Now, Hound is one of my favorite monsters in the archetype because it is sneakingly strong, and the main reason for this is Lupus. I think if any card were to, funny enough, need to be eliminated out of the archetype to make the deck weaker, if you eliminated Lupus, the deck isn't unplayable actually. It's just it has less of the unfair stuff. Now, this is mostly because all the cards that target in the format aren't able to touch a lot of the K9 or rank 5 monsters if you're running the K9 engine. So this is like the hilarious factor, but that's the unfair thing that it can do more than the others. But when it comes to the K9 archetype, Hound is like one of the sneakingly best monsters because most people just don't understand the value it actually provides, because it provides a value you can't understand if you're just looking at it from like card advantage. Now what I mean by this is that Hound, when it hits the field, it allows you to effectively for the turn it's special summoned, right? It can't be destroyed by battle or card effects. So at first you're like, I mean, Brad, that's like not that good. However, that's not what it's not about exactly what you're trying to accomplish. It's what you actually offer the rest of your deck. So what I mean by this is that Hound has that ability where it can't be destroyed. So why was that useful? Well, this allows it to chump block. But more importantly, each time your opponent activates a monster effect, this card gains 500 attack when that effect resolves. This does not say end of turn. This does not say if the cards leave the field. This is a permanent stat buff. And then once per turn during the standby phase, you can detach one material from this card, then target one card on the field as cost, and then you banish it. So pretty much what you're going to understand about Hound, and I'm going to show you, is that Hound's strength is that this is an actual, combined with Lupus, if there is only targeting removal on the field, Hound becomes a Towers. Now, Hound becomes a Towers, and this is really problematic for some decks, is that if all they have is targeting removal, a buffed Hound with something like the Lupus underneath it, it just means that this card can't be touched. This is why I think in matchups where the Yummy player isn't running something like Forbidden Droplets, or if you're playing against Draco Tail specifically in this format and they don't realize they need to use their Mululu on the Hound, you can pretty much just wall them out, because Hound's biggest strength is that there's no way to get rid of it if Lupus is underneath it if they only have targeting removal, because Hound will just keep getting bigger, bigger, and bigger, and bigger, and your opponent is kind of forced to have to deal with this really big Towers that can, with multiple materials, start to detach them and start banishing cards off the field. Why Hound is so good sneakingly is that it is the comeback mechanic in the deck, or it is that bridge Xyz that you want to go into, because yes, this is a light Xyz monster, so if you were to go into your rank 5 plays, remember you can't actually make this if you use like Joku or Lantern, because those monsters on their effects say no light monsters, so this is always going to be usually Xyz summoned. As the liberations allow you to get into this is just really powerful. Hound allows you to, interestingly enough, choose whether you're first or second, because when you are going into a board going first, Hound still actually is a usable target, because you really want to make Ripper with the Hound on top of it. So going Ripper into Hound is usually a good way to bridge if you want more materials before you go into X-Werewolf. But Hound is also really good to be made during the battle phase with LC Liberation, because when you go into Hound, you are pretty much just saying, hey, you can't destroy this by battle or card effect, and then with Lupus underneath, this is untargetable as well. So in the battle phase, this pretty much will survive no matter what, but also it forces your opponent to decide whether they want to make the Hound bigger, because Hound with LC Liberation can effectively break most fields if the Hound is big enough, because a 4K plus Hound is enough to usually win a game. I'm not even joking here, because usually it's just too much for the opponent to handle, and that's really cool to see. But guys, I want to finish off here because this is the power of these cards, and the point of what I'm trying to get at too, so I can explain everything with this one big circle. K9 is able to do a lot, but what it's actually trying to do, and this is just, you know, the hot take I would guess to say, is that all the Justice Hunters decks were designed to have the ability to go first and second. This is why most of them, believe it or not, are designed on being mid-range combo decks. But the key thing is, what do they do better at? Now, K9 is definitely, and I do mean this literally, better at going second. Now, you could argue with me about this, but K9 has all the right pieces to go second and do it a little bit better than Draco Tail and Yummy. But the reason for this is simple. When K9 goes second, the ability for all the monsters to pop off are there. Your opponent must interact with your board if they're doing stuff. There is a higher likelihood that they may have 2 or more cards in hand due to 1-card combos in Yu-Gi-Oh! Also, holding hand traps is a great way to bait with K9, because when you look at their hand and you can normal summon, then they're like, uh-oh, like they might have to use interactions on these monsters, but they don't know how many K9s are in your hand, so they might be able to pop off in that regard with like Azuna and all that. But the point is, you have stat buffs off of Case. Case of K9, when your opponent activates a monster effect, they might as well just say goodbye to their field. because usually you can just run over their field. There are times where you can just wall up with like 3 or 4 of the K9 monsters in attack position and just proceed to start attacking your opponent, because all of them will usually be over the almost close to the 3k threshold. And the crazy thing is Lupus on its own on the field is at 2300. So with the case of K9 up, it becomes 32. That's insane. Like, I had someone be like, how big is it? I'm like, it's at 3200. They're like, oh geez. And you just proceed to run over everything in the field. The reason I bring this up, like I said, to tie it all together, is that K9 has a strong focus actually going second, because a lot of these effects benefit them going second. Ex-Werewolf is literally an OTK card built in with interaction effects, so do keep that in mind. But the point is, this is what K9 is truly able to do, and these 3 cards that I talked about today are the more underdeveloped cards in the archetype that people don't really talk about. But I think if you want a better understanding of the strategy as I've developed, I think you need to look at these cards and find ways to really bring them together. I really like the ability of bringing the EW, because it does allow you to like bridge those really bad hands with the card where it's only like Lupus or only something in your hand you can't really use. This allows you to get that out of the hand without using Lupus's effect, so it won't be banished, and then you exceed, and then you can try to come back and push your opponent or catch them off guard. Or a 1-card Ex-Werewolf, even if you're going to lose it, isn't that bad in my opinion, because, you know, you get to look at their hand and banish a card from it. So knowledge is key. Point is, the main thing is LC and Hound also function with similar abilities. LC allowing you to OTK, but also get you out of sticky situations, because, you know, force release is only during the main phase. And like I said, Hound is just something I think people should experiment with. Hound control, I did this against Yummy. Basically, it's how I got my friend to for sure get droplets, because I was like, you need it, because he was like, yeah, I can't do anything to that Hound scoop. And I'm like, yep, so good idea for him. But the point is, this can happen to everyone. So this is more for knowledge, and I hope you guys learned something today. But I'm getting out of here, guys, and this has been Brad from the Ed Army signing off, and for all of you out there, to sign on.